Hi everybody, welcome back. We're continuing our series of videos on welfare economics. In the last video we talked about consumer surplus, and if you haven't checked that one out, I recommend you do that because it goes into a little bit more detail than I'll be going into in this video, because a lot of the same principles apply, and we're just applying them to the seller side of the market instead of the buyer side. So this video will go a little bit more quickly than the consumer surplus. Again, if you haven't seen that, go check that one out. So again, welfare economics is looking at how the allocation of resources affects both producers, consumers, and producers. And now that we're talking about cost and supply curve, we're going to be getting into producers. Okay, and so cost is simply the value of everything a seller must give up to produce a good. Value of everything a seller must give up to produce a good. Okay, these are input costs, the cost of the resources, the cost of the labor and the machines and all of that, but it's also opportunity cost. And the only reason a seller is going to enter the market and decide to sell their product or service is if the price is higher than their costs. And so ultimately, just as with the producers, we can think about their demand as their willingness to buy. For producers, cost is really a measurement of their willingness to sell. And so we're going to look at that with an example here. We have three people in a lawn cutting business: Jack, Janet, and Chris. And these are their costs. And so with those costs, we can, just as we did with consumer surplus and the demand curve, we can do the same thing here with willingness to sell and the supply curve. So when we have a cost or a price of a lawn to be mowed between 0 and 9, nobody's able to cover their costs at less than $10. So the quantity supplied at these low prices is 0. Nobody can cover their costs, so nobody's going to do it. When the price is 10, Jack is going to enter the market, and he's going to be the only one up till 19. At 20, Jack is still going to be willing to sell his service, but Janet is as well. And at 35, Chris is going to jump into the market too. So again, we have a price and quantity supplied. With that, we can create a supply curve. Normally, supply curves are upward sloping like this, nice and smooth. But again, because we only have 3 people, we're going to have a step function. So from 0 to $10, quantity supplied is 0. But at $10, Jack is willing to jump in and supply his service. So quantity demanded goes up to 1. He's the only one at $10, 11, 12, 13, all the way up to 20. He's the only one, so the quantity demanded remains 1. And then Janet's in, and then Chris is in at 30. Chris is in at 30. So at 30, that pushes the supply curve over to a quantity supplied of 3. And it's just going to stay at 3 because there are only 3 people. So that gives us a little supply curve. And again, just as we had with the demand curve and willingness to buy, with the supply curve, we have each marginal seller. So at a price of 10, Jack is willing to sell, and so he is the marginal seller at a price of 10. When we have more people, just as before, we're going to have more steps, and then we're going to have more marginal sellers, and it's going to become smoother and smoother like a nice supply curve. Market supply curve. Okay, and again, at that price, if that price is any lower, he's immediately out of the market. Quantity supplied is going to zero. So that's this idea of the marginal seller. And from that, we have producer surplus. So producer surplus is the amount a seller is paid for a good minus their costs. The amount a seller is paid for their good is paid for a good or service minus their costs. So what are they paid? They are paid the price. And what is their cost? We're just going to write that as cost. And so consumer surplus, willingness to pay minus price. Producer surplus, price minus cost. Okay, and so again, let's take an example here from the same lawn mowing business. And suppose the price is $25. At that price, Jack would definitely be willing to supply his service because his costs are only $10. If he's going to get $25 for doing it, then he's going to do it. So Jack is going to get all of this area here as producer surplus. And Janet has the little box here. And the whole thing is total producer surplus. Okay, so how do we calculate these? Jack's, it's the area of this box, which happens to be, in both cases, a base of 1. So it's just 1 times 15 from 25, 10 up to 25. That's $15. So that's Jack's. Let's do this properly. Jack's producer surplus is equal to the price minus his cost, which is 25 minus 10 for his total of 15. Janet's producer surplus, price minus cost, 25 minus her cost of 20. So she has a surplus of 5. Total producer surplus is $20. Okay, so simple addition of everybody who gets surplus. Chris receives no surplus because he's not in the market. And just as we saw for consumer surplus being the area above the price, below the demand curve, the producer surplus is the area below the price and above the supply curve. So the lesson here, total producer surplus is the area above the supply curve, under the price, from 0 to quantity supplied. Total producer surplus is the area above the supply curve, under the price, from 0 to the quantity supplied. And so just as we did with consumer surplus, let's take this to a full market where we have many sellers, and let's suppose that the price is 40. At that price, again, we have all these marginal sellers who make up the supply curve. And so there is somebody, some seller here, who has a cost of $30, and that one person, this line represents one person's consumer surplus. Sorry, producer surplus. They have a producer surplus of 10. This person here has a producer surplus of 20, right? And so at any given place, you can look at the producer surplus of everybody and aggregate that up by taking the, again, area of this triangle. So the way we do that, the area between the price and the supply curve is, remember, half the base times, let's just do 1/2 base times height is the area of a triangle. And this triangle happens to have a base of 25 and a height of, 25, because we're starting here at 15 up to 40. And so we calculate this producer surplus as 1/2 of 25 times 25. That's going to come out to $3.12 and 50 cents. Okay. Finally, just as we did with consumer surplus, let's make a change in price. And let's go from 40, where we had a total surplus of $3.12, and let's decrease the price to $30. So now producer surplus is only this area here. The area of that, let's go ahead and calculate this really quickly. For the new area, we have a 15 by 15 triangle. So half of 15 by 15 is $1.12 and 50 cents. And just as before, we can calculate two reasons why there's a drop in producer surplus. One, the first reason is that there are people who were previously in the market. They were receiving a lot of surplus. So this person was making, let's call it 25 up to 40. This person was making 15 in producer surplus. Now at the lower price, now at the lower price, they're only making 5, from 30 down to 25. So they were making 15, now they're making 5. Same thing here, somebody making a bunch, now they're making less and less. And so all of these people in this box, they've lost surplus. And that one we're going to call, that's going to be lost due to reason 1. These people, they were also getting some surplus before. So this person here, they were, the price was 40, their costs were 35, they had a producer surplus of 5. But at a price of 30, they're no longer able to cover their costs. They drop out of the market. So they're gone. This person's gone. And in this case, this is going to be reason 2, and that's going to be a loss in producer surplus due to people leaving the market. Similar to what we had in the producer surplus. So reason number 1 for a fall in producer surplus is due to remaining sellers getting a lower price. Due to remaining sellers getting a lower price. And the reason number 2 is due to sellers leaving the market. Okay, and so just as before, I'm going to leave you off with a little exercise to think about to think about another example of producer surplus. So we're going to have one marginal seller here, and what's their cost? That's kind of easy to see. We're going to find total producer surplus at a price of 20. Finding that is part B. That's part A. And then we're going to increase the price to 30. So going the opposite direction. Some of these sellers are going to increase their producer surplus some more. So how much is producer surplus going to increase due to the same sellers selling more and getting a higher price? And there are going to be some sellers that increase. Actually, this one's part C, this one's part D. Some sellers are going to enter the market that previously weren't in the market. Okay, so go ahead and try to do those. Try to calculate A, B, C, and D, and I will put the answers in the description. And in the next video, we're going to put everything together, consumer and producer surplus both, talk about total surplus and efficiency in the market. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll see you in the next video.